Hello, and welcome to another episode of Other Record Labels. I'm Scott Orr. Thank you so much for listening, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Today we're talking with Manny of Citrus City Records. Citrus City Records are based out of Virginia, and a really cool label, and I'm excited to have a chat with Manny. But first, let's talk about how you, the listener, can get 10% off this great ebook from Work Hard, Playlist Hard. I want to tell you, our label, Other Songs, has experienced some recent micro success with Spotify playlists. And I've said in the past that playlisting has become a focus for our label because it's something that I've noticed can expose you to a new audience as well as generate some modest, consistent income for the label and for the artist. And the success we've had recently has been due in part to two things. Number one, this new feature that Spotify has announced a couple weeks ago, where you can actually pitch your music directly to their editorial staff, as well as an interesting feature that if you give them at least a week or two lead time on a single or an album, they will include one of your songs or your new song into the release radar playlist of your followers, all of them, and that's an incredible thing. And the other contributor to some of our success has been this ebook that I'm talking to you about from this third-party curator, Work Hard, Playlist Hard, and Mike, the guy there, is a genius when it comes to playlisting, and he's compiled a lot of his research and information and facts. The book is $10. You get an extra $1 off if you go to ebook.otherrecordlabels.com and use the coupon code OTHER. It really helps us out, and I think you're really going to like this book. You said Orange County, Virginia.
Yeah.
And is that like, where did Citrus City come from? That name, like what does that mean?
Oh, so pretty much, I was in my freshman year of community college at the time.
Okay.
And pretty much I've had this sort of idea of wanting to like start my own little label or just like do something since I was a music journalist before that. I was writing for this site called Indie Current, and
okay.
Those were like my aspirations, I guess. I like did 4 years of journalism in high school, was like the entertainment editor, and was doing a lot of print journalism and online journalism, and so yeah, I was writing for this music blog fresh out of like high school, and yeah, in community college I just kind of was getting bored with that, and I didn't know if I wanted to still do journalism. But yeah, I met someone in community college, my label partner Renee Franco, and we just kind of I don't know, kick things off. We both come from like a Latin American background. I'm from Guatemala, and they are from El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
So just seeing someone that likes quote unquote indie music or guitar like bass music like that is really like hard to come by, just because it's like, I don't know, pretty much a stereotype that I guess sometimes this sort of music is just white people music, I
right.
guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but we just met because they were wearing a Waves shirt.
Okay.
And I ironically was at that show a few days ago, and then they were too. So we just kicked things off. But yeah, we just were hanging out, always going to shows a lot, always just exchanging music with each other. And then I just kind of brought up the idea, like I really have wanted to start like a label, and just I've had this idea, and then they were like, well, I'll like be down to like help you and join. And so I guess during that whole like year span of like school, we just kept like thinking what we wanted to do and what really like our passions lied in regards to like all this.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what we wanted to was foster like a community and just like a roster of artists that at the time we're both really like friendly, cheerful people, and we just thought like, okay, we want something to like transmit that and just sort of like positive, like, upbeat music. And I don't know, we just kind of were like, well, Citrus is really like, something bright, upbeat, Um, and then we just, at first, we were going to call it Citrus Recordings. And then we
Hmm.
saw that there was already like a Citrus Recordings based in like Florida. So,
Okay.
we just kind of, my Renee was just like, well, let's add city at the end since it's like, the city of citrus. Like this is like a hub of like this sort of like upbeat, positive like music. So I guess that's where
Oh, that's
Citrus City
great.
sort of came, and like that's what it kind of like encompassed.
So you said it's like indie guitar music, but is that kind of like a consistent thread throughout all of your releases? Have you kind of, and would you say like most of them have been kind of upbeat and a little bit more cheerful, or?
So pretty much from like the beginning origins, we didn't like we like I love indie music and I love anything in the realms of that, but
Mhm.
I've always had different other interests in music. Like I love hip hop, like jazz, anything sort of folk or anything just that is not indie music.
Yeah.
And we like when we started, we never intended to just fully release like indie music. So that's why now we like have like some rappers on the
Oh,
roster. Like
cool.
we have like some cumbia psychedelic like bands and just more of like Latin American like folk music and stuff. So that's like where we're kind of like the direction we're going towards. But yeah, we have some releases that are a bit more like emo than others, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And just
that's
but
cool.
that's been like a constant theme that it's like majority of the things that we have released are very like upbeat and cheerful.
I'm looking back. Okay, so when did this all happen? Like your first sampler came out that I see here is in 2015. Is that when the label started?
So the label, so that was like when we released or like finally we released something, but it actually we had the idea since like 2014.
Oh wow.
Um, and just kind of like I like sat on it for like the longest. I just had I had no idea how to start a label. I had like, no info on that. So that whole like
Mhm.
year of 2014, like I just was messaging like other smaller like tape labels and just, asking questions that's like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, is it required to go full LLC when you like start out? Like, where do you get like tapes? Like,
Right.
and
Right.
so it's just like that full year, I just kind of was just researching and really like figuring out how to go about this.
Did you get help from other labels? Did they respond to you?
Um, Not only two helped out
Okay.
and responded. The rest of them were just kind of like figure it out on your own, which is like I mean
Oh,
like fair. So I'm just like, all
sure.
right, I'm not looking for no secrets or like shortcuts because I know
Right.
at the end of the day that doesn't really
Yeah,
exist in like the
exactly.
music industry.
Yeah.
So there was this one label based out of Chicago, Grabbing Cloud Records, that released a bunch of tapes I really liked. That they were super helpful and insightful, and another one in like Montreal called Egg Paper Factory. That's like probably my favorite label of all time.
Okay,
So it
yeah.
was like they like just helped me out a lot, told me like the sort of ins and outs, like the do's and don'ts, and just like sort of things to like be cautious and wary. And yeah, they really did help me out, and it's like I owe a lot to those two labels.
That's awesome. That's great, and that's great that you did find someone to help you out. And so you were asking about like when you were talking to these labels, you were asking about like what manufacturing and legal stuff or digital stuff. Like what kind of things like really stumped you at the beginning?
Well, I just I guess when I mean I was a lot younger, people, and I guess it's just like with people that really don't sort of like already had the insight as like a music journalist and stuff, and I was always getting stuff from like labels like Captured Tracks or like Sub Pop and things like that.
Hmm.
So these were like more established labels. So I just felt like I was stumped because it's like, well, obviously I don't have the financial like resources or anything to sort of go full on like quote unquote professional mode, whatever that really
Yeah.
entails to. So I just had no idea with like being just like a broke college kid how to really like help facilitate things and how to really go about. So yeah, I just asked like what how does one really start off and go about? Like it's just like what do you like is this like the like way or is like whatever way? And I guess things that I really figured out is just like it's whatever way you want to go about.
Mm.
So I've always had sort of qualms with like the music industry and like sort of how things work, and so I just felt really weird how there was some people that were like, well, you gotta like sign contracts and you have to like own the rights to like the artist's music and stuff,
Right.
and those were things that I felt very like weird about, just because
Agreed.
my whole intention with Citrus City, and it still is, it's just I want to like document and preserve like overlooked and like just like underrated bands' music on like a physical format, since a lot of the bands that I was writing about when I was like a music journalist were bands that were just like on Bandcamp and SoundCloud and had like 200 likes on like Facebook and had no really sort of blog coverage. So I just kind of wanted to sort of really take that sort of mentality as a music like writer and as like now a label head, is just like, well, this band has like an amazing EP or amazing full length and they don't have tapes. So I would just ask like, hey, do you all need like tapes or a physical format or anything? Like it's all pretty much like free of charge, nothing like weird. We've always done like an even amount of tapes. So at first it was just like super like low like runs of like 50 tapes, and we would just split it evenly like 25-25, and the band or artist could do whatever they want with those tapes. Like they could eat them, sell them, like throw them in the
Right.
trash, like whatever. It's like free of charge. Like we don't withhold anything or ask for anything.
Interesting. That's a good model. I want to ask you about, we're kind of hopping all over the place, but it's kind of fun. The journalism thing. So you were a music journalist and you said you were getting like press packs and stuff from Captured and from other labels. Like what did you learn? Like what did you pull from that experience into starting your own label?
So I guess what's helped me out with that and seeing a lot of things like that is how to sort of articulate sort of press releases and put them together. And just sort of like how to really like formally start in like email or just things like that. Or I guess it's just like seeing how things are really like neatly packaged in like a press kit.
Right.
So it's just like stuff like that I really picked up on, and just really just sort of like sometimes seeing how weirdly commercialized some things would be like pushed. So I guess that sort of taught me like, okay, this is not what I want to like do with my own things, and I guess these are the things I do want to do. So I guess a lot of stuff like that has helped me sort of just broaden my eyes on how really the music industry is. And I mean, it was always fun getting sort of things like private streams like a year or like a few months like before it would be released. So I think it's just like stuff like that was super interesting to notice.
And that stuff that you carried through, that stuff that you were like, okay, I got to get a private stream to writers like 3 or 4 months in advance. Did you do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I started doing that sort of like the first and second year of when I was with the label. I don't do it as much as before, just because I just have a lot of qualms with like the way major publications work, and just things that how like I could release something and then we've had artists that get picked up by bigger labels, and then the EP gets reissued and then it's like all over the fader and stuff, and I'm just like, wow, I hit you up about this like 2 years ago, but that's cool.
That's funny. Okay, so you make the tapes, and I want to ask you about cassettes because we've talked about that with some other labels, and something I'm really curious about, but that's later. I'm curious about you release a record and it's a relatively unknown band. In the beginning and still today, how do you think your fans find your label? How are people finding out about you?
So really it started, um, it has been like a grassroots sort of like operation. Um, Mostly it started out with, I think what has helped us the most is that, I wasn't in like a centralized location that I had like the like advantages of being in like in a local music community. I was
Okay.
just really doing all this in my mom's basement and I'm really just like out in like the country pretty much. It's just like a house and then it's just like a bunch of like acres of trees and then like 10 minutes down it's like another house.
Okay.
So I didn't have the advantages at first of being like surrounded by a local music community, so I always used like the internet and our first compilation, like our sampler was just like it has bands like a band from Paris, like
Wow.
someone from like Sweden, some artists from like Australia, London, someone from Japan, someone from like Michigan, and so forth and so forth. So I think at first I was super. I wanted to connect all these people that were based in other regions of the country and the world. So what's helped is that their friends sort of were like, "Hey, look, my song is on this like label that just started, it's like Sampler, like check them out." And like so many people from like, cause it's like a ton of artists on that sampler, and a lot of their friends and sort of like fans like got hooked on us, and then a lot of our earlier releases are like Boys Age from Japan, like Lois from Madrid, Spain, and so on. We just kept releasing a lot of bands that weren't from the Virginia area,
Hmm.
and pretty much just like internationally. So a lot of just like of word of mouth and just really using the internet to sort of connect and sort of build bridges. And then it wasn't until when I like transferred over from Nova Community College to VCU in Richmond is where I really I was always going to Richmond to drive up to shows and stuff like that, but it wasn't until I was living there that I got really immersed with like the local community, and I was like, well, um I'm like I lived in the spot with like a few friends who we released Colin Thibodeau, and then later they changed their name Lance Bangs, that we would just throw house shows and just, would just start our own little like sect within this big community, and sort of I kept presenting them under like Citrus City, and so I started doing shows, and so I guess doing like the online stuff and then finally moving into Richmond and branching out like that within the local community is when people really were starting to like check Citrus City out and go in depth and be like, oh, cool, this little like tape label from Virginia released someone from Japan. I'm gonna check that out. Or vice versa, someone from Japan would be like, wow, Citrus City released a band from Virginia. I'm gonna check this out.
You've like I'm looking through your Bandcamp, and I mean most of your records like are sold out. So like in my mind, you've been pretty successful with these limited runs of tapes. That must feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's like it's all super interesting, honestly, just because it never the way things have turned out and have grown, I never sort of anticipated. It was just mostly I started this because it's like I wanted to help out these artists and people's music that I really, really enjoyed. And it was just mostly like, okay, they don't have a tape, and this is just an excuse for me to like own the tape. If no
Yeah.
one else is gonna make it, like I'm gonna like spend my personal funds into making
I've
this. I
done the
don't.
exact same thing. I literally have something that is pressed to a limited, and like I don't think anyone else has bought a copy, but it's okay because it was $200 like well spent for me to have my own copy and backup copies.
No, yeah, of course. And it's like we've had like one of like a lot of our earlier releases that finally like 3 years later have been selling out, and
Oh, nice.
it's just like okay, cool, like this is finally out there like in the world. We made like 60 copies, and it's just like it's all out there now. So it's like
These
I don't know.
Sorry, these tapes, they don't look DIY. Like have you always done it at a plant?
So A lot of like so a lot of them they are through like pro dubbed, and then I have a lot of like duplicators and sort of tape decks, and I do like ones like by hand as well.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like yeah, so it varies.
Oh, okay. Okay. And is it just usually like based on like how many you think you can sell?
Yeah, so it's like when I sort of gauge on how like okay, um like on the artist Bandcamp, how many sort of fans and sort of people like have purchased it, I sort of gauge through that and be like, okay, this is we should do this one as like a pro sort of run,
Right.
as opposed to when it's sort of like a new band in the Virginia area that's just like, yeah, we're not really looking to tour or anything, sort of just play some shows here or there.
Hmm.
I'm just like, all right, cool. I have like some blanks and like some labels or stuff, or if they just want to keep it just the tape of the J card in case.
Yeah.
I just kind of, plug up the duplicators and just make like a limited run. So it just like depends on mostly what the artist wants to do and if they have intentions to like tour and like play like more shows, and really just gauging their audience where it's like, okay, are we going to go pro dub or just hand dub?
I remember that Skirts record that came out. I think it was this year, right?
Yeah.
That was a pretty big record. That's a great record.
Thank you. Yeah, it was such an honor to like put that out, since Alex the Skirts,
Hmm.
they have their own little tape label as well called Peach Bloom, and
Okay.
they sort of like self-release like their music, and almost touching sort of like sold out on like their own, and so they were just like not anticipating that, and they just weren't like in a position to fully like repress it because there was such a high demand. And
Hmm.
we've like met like through like online, and like have had the honor and like pleasure of meeting in like real life a few times, since they're based in Dallas.
Okay.
And we just kind of were like, hey, like we would like love to help out and like get this out there to like more people.
So where are you, like, how are you finding bands today? I mean, I imagine now at this point you're getting a lot of music sent to you, but I mean, how often do you make a decision and say, okay, I want to put this record out, in 6 months or a year from now? Where are you finding these people?
So sometimes it's just like a good old fashioned like just Bandcamp hunt.
Okay.
Just spending several hours through going through some tags of like genres that I would like. Um, but mostly I do a lot of like tour management and just touring, that I just find out a lot of bands through just of going through certain like other respective like music communities and scenes across the country.
Hmm.
And just also just like by word of mouth, I'll have like a friend who's like based in Montreal that's like, yo, check out this band like that's going like that just played a show, like they're super good, you would check them, like you would like them.
Yeah.
And just like just stuff like that, just mostly just like through word of mouth and friends like showing me stuff, and I just stumbling upon like a cool like local band in like Austin, Texas, or like in like Savannah, Georgia, or in Atlanta, Georgia. So I think it's just mostly I've had it's been like a cool like privilege and advantage traveling the country and like being able to witness these local like communities and like the bands that I necessarily wouldn't have like seen if I wasn't there present at a show.
Right, right. You've been pretty like present online on Twitter. I mean, that's how I've came across you, and your label comes up in my feed like all the time. Just people talking
Yeah.
about you, or so you must, because of that. I would imagine you must get demos sent in a lot.
Yeah, we get some demos. We've honestly to this date we've only put out three things demo wise
Oh, that's
that
quite a
from
lot, actually.
yeah, from submissions. It's just three, and it's just like we get like a whole ton of stuff, and you know, s- some of it it's not. I don't like to be a super critical person as to say negative things, but some of the stuff is not just like for me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like I'm super transparent and honest with folks that hit us up, and it's just like, hey, look, it's not you, it's really me, and it's not. It would be a disservice to pick up something that I know I wouldn't fully give it the 110
Hmm.
like love and care that it would deserve. And like I always try to like be like, hey, these would be like better labels like for your music, like a better fit, and
Oh,
just like
that's nice.
give tips on being like if no one picks it up, it like don't get discouraged. Like here are places where you can get tapes and like self-release like it too. Like that is never bad
Yeah.
at all.
It's such a miracle if you can find someone online. And because, for me, and it's happened, a few times over the past like 8 or 9 years. And it's like, it's this like incredible, like chemical reaction where it's like a record that I am obsessed with that like is one of my favorite records of the year, but that is also completely unknown and hasn't been properly released yet, or ideally at all released yet. And so it's just that like perfect concoction. If that actually happens, then it's like, and if they're game, of course. But it's just so rare because I'll get submissions or something will come through like Submit Hub, and it's like it's this is good and everything, but like there's so much that goes into a relationship, a label relationship. And
Oh yeah, of
it's like
course.
you said, like if I don't personally think this is the best record of the year, then I can't like put my reputation on the line, or not my reputation, but I can't email my contacts and beg them to write about it,
Yeah.
if it's not something that I want to use up one of those coupons with.
No, exactly. I totally feel the same way, and I think it's like, you know, a lot of like there's like a lot that goes into like things that people do, whether you're like a band or artist. Like sometimes people don't know that it like takes a lot of hard work and effort if you're like an up and coming artist and you just have like a home recording material into going through into that, or if you're a band or an artist that has a bit more cash to spend, then you want to put more like time and effort and maybe going into the studio. So I'm like super aware of like the things that everyone like has to do to make that and to put it out, and like having confidence to like release it to a label. And then there's times that I feel like people don't know the ins and outs of like people who are running labels as to what they want to do, and it's just like I would just love to release everything that has come into my sort of
Mm.
like inbox and stuff that I even like, but it's just like it's just mostly me nowadays running it, and I just don't have the sort of like so much resources to just put out everything that I
Right.
like really like. So I have to read like, and it's not even sort of picky where it's like an elitist sort of thing. I just have to be picky because it's like I have this amount of like money on me right now, and there's like two things that I really want to release. And there's like five things that I'm just like, whoa, I wish I could release. I really have to choose the ones that I feel really passionately and strongly about, just because it's like I kind of have my hands tied the majority of the time. So it's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
so.
You made a good point. Like we talked about this a little bit with some other labels about how um, it's like a lot of artists and they don't really understand what goes into releasing a record or running a label, and that's okay. Like it's not their job to know what's involved, but you'll get an email and it's like, hey, I'm hoping to release this record next month and I'm looking for a label. And it's like, well, we're thinking like we're trying to think far ahead. We're trying to give ourselves leeway, and you can just kind of tell that like it isn't really fully understood like what it takes to properly release a record and to give a record the due the due time it deserves to get heard.
No, exactly. We've gotten some folks that hit us up and they're like, "Hey, I'm releasing this album this Friday. I want tapes next week." And I'm just like, buddy, I wish I could like, like with stuff that I really want to release, I wish I could just put out the tapes next week like
Yeah,
it's nothing,
yeah.
So it's just like I don't
Well,
know. Sometimes people really just don't. It's not as just like simple as like, okay, you put out an album, that's great and all. It's like super easy to like just put out something digitally, but it's just like takes a lot of time and like planning and like effort to really like, okay, I really believe in this record and I think it would make like a good enough splash. Let's like wait for like 4 or 5, like 6 months. um Let me like reach out to some writers, may like,
Yeah.
private links, and just etc. And it's just like I think people don't realize a lot of like the planning that comes behind putting out a record.
Totally. And I, on the same token, like, I would encourage indie artists to, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but in a way, I kind of wish that indie artists would like get in touch with a label like really early in the game and say like, hey, I'm in the middle of recording a record and I think it's really special. Here's a rough mix. I'm hoping to have it done in 3 months from now. You know what I mean? Because there's so many records that I've heard where I've like, man, I wish you had told me about this. Like, because they want to release it like imminently because now it's been mixed and mastered and it's like a year old in their mind and they want to get it out there as quick as possible. And I just kind of feel like, man, I wish that this artist had actually emailed me early in the early stages so that I could have been involved right from the beginning and kind of like prepared this for its release,
No, I totally feel the same way. We're actually like one of the few first times like ever that has happened to us. We're like in like chats with like an artist and like they sent us like the rough demos and like it's just like, this is like just where I'm at right now. This is like the completely early stages, but if you like what you're hearing so far, like I would love to like, and it's just that really does like help me out. And it was
Mm.
just like really refreshing that I'm just like, wow, someone finally did this. And it's like I'm not opposed to where it's just like someone already has like it's all mixed and mastered and they like want to get it out like this sort of time frame. But I think it's just like I would appreciate more if like artists knew that it's just like if you have someone in mind that you want to work with, establish a dialogue super early on,
Hmm.
being like, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm at right now, like would you possibly be interested? It's all still like tentatively like in the works, but if you're down, I would love to like plan this ahead. Like I think that would just make things a lot more easier for like the artist at the end of the day and the label.
And it's actually, I totally agree. I love that. And it's actually like intimidating when it's the opposite. And like an artist says, we've already done our press photos. Here's our press kit. This is the album artwork, and we're expecting to release it in 2 months or a month from now. And it's, to me, it's like when I get an email like that, I just find it too overwhelming. Even if it's remotely possible to like get on board and help them release it, or if I really, really like the record, it's still just too intimidating. It's just like, or not intimidating, but overwhelming. It's like, you know what? I've got a lot of things like on my plate right now, and the where you're at, like with this record, is not where I'm at. So what you're saying is like, I think that would be way less overwhelming if someone's just like, listen, in the next 12 months, like 8 to 12 months, I might have a record finished and here's what it might sound like. Let's start this process now.
Yeah, it would just make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it's just it's so hectic when it's like I'm already in mid sort of like release mode, sort of planning things out, and someone just kind of is like, hey, like I have this and this done, and I'm looking to release like in 2 months, and it kind of lands around the same sort of month we have something already planned that has
Yeah.
been planned for like a year, and
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, like I really wish you hit me up like way like in advance about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, totally. Um, we've talked a lot about cassettes on this podcast, and I mean your Bandcamp has got a ton of great cassettes. Um, why cassettes for you? What was the attraction to them for your label?
So I've always been into physical like formats. I've always been I've always enjoyed having like intangible like object of
Hmm.
music, and it's just like this is my copy. Like this is like out of 100, I have like copy number like 32.
Oh
Like
yeah, that's true.
this one is like mine. So I've always been into sort of like owning like the music. Like I'm a big fan of like digital releases, like that's always chill. I always was on LimeWire when that was like a thing at one
Yeah.
point, and I've always been into making mix CDs and stuff. So yeah, I got really into tapes like my sophomore year of high school. I was at a show in DC for it was like Beach Fossils and two local DC bands, The Sea Life and this other one called like Baby Bri Bri and The Apologist, and they just had tapes, and I just was like amazed by like their set, and it was like the last one. I didn't even have a like tape player, but I was just like, I want this just because it's like they don't have anything else, and it's just So
Yeah.
I got my first tape in like sophomore year, and I just kind of kept like you know kept getting as many tapes as I possibly could from like a lot of the band. A lot of the bands that I really liked were like Bandcamp bands or like local bands that really didn't have the funding to put out a 7-inch or even like a full like LP on like wax.
Hmm.
So I guess I've always liked how it was just easy to sort of get. It would be like $5 or $6, and at the time I'm just like, I didn't have like the cash to just fully splurge on like a record that was like 15 or like $20 like the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
The tape has always been like this, like the safest option for me to afford, and I guess I just like how it's like, although a lot of people are like, oh, like where are you gonna listen to it and like stuff like that. I think the cassette is also a good sort of like way to showcase art. I think it's like a
Uh-huh.
good art
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of ways to sort of pop out, like like a vinyl like jacket, and sort of have things inserted like the linear notes and everything, and having like a colored like record. And but I think with like a cassette tape, there's just so much more to sort of like present it, and
Hmm.
have it like a J card that is like folds up, and it like you take it out, and it's like a 10 sort of like page like picture book or something like
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I just think I've always liked of how the possibility is like endless on how to like make a cassette tape.
It is cool how a lot of the indie labels in kind of your community is like have what they've done with the cassette, like the different things that they've done with the labels or the stamping, or with the color of the cassette, and with the J card or the cassette single, and then with throwing in a pin or a sticker. I think you're right. I think it's actually a great piece of art.
Yeah, and it's just always been I mean, it's like, be honest, I didn't starting out, I did not have like $2,000 or like $3,000 to put out like
Yeah.
250 like, records on
12
like
inch.
vinyl.
Yeah.
And so like I guess it's just very like accessible and like affordable at the same time, like going with the cassette route. Not that I'm against vinyl or anything. Like it's just, it's like the easiest option for like where I'm at right at like the moment in my life.
Well, and I think what's cool about that is it started, I think it's true. I mean, I've talked to a few labels about this, but it's true that it kind of has started for economical reasons. We want a physical thing because, like you said, a lot of people will say, well, I don't even have a way of playing it. And hopefully that'll change down the road. But I think it's still great to have a physical piece to remind you that this record is in your collection, even if it's just in your iTunes or on your phone. It's nice to say, oh yeah, that record is, I own that record. I saw that band live. I like those people.
Yeah, and I don't know. I really enjoyed things like that, and it just goes a long way for me personally, owning things that it's just like I know they put the time and effort to like do, and it's just like documenting like a sort of time and just like moment in like the artists' lives and like my life as well.
Well, what I've noticed happening now in 2018 that I really appreciate is that the cassette has become like a calling card for specific genres. It's become like the format of choice, and whether it is for economical reasons, I don't know. But now it's like when I see a cassette, especially with a certain type of artwork, you just know what it's going to sound like. You know that it's going to be like a lo-fi indie rock that that you like and that you enjoy. And so, or in like a ambient drone or something, or experimental. But to me, it's like those two genres. I kind of know, like, if I were to just pick up something on your Bandcamp, like there's a really good chance I'm pretty much gonna like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you.
I want to ask about inventory. I was talking to a friend recently about the magic number for inventory, where you can sell out and not be stuck with extra stock, but at the same time, you want to get as many copies in the world as you can, and you want to make money for the bands and for yourself. Is there a formula for quantities with tapes that you go by?
So it's I guess it's like how I mentioned before. It's sort of gauging the already sort of set fan base, if the band has any. Sort of potentially seeing like, okay, is this like, I don't like to label things like if this will be commercially successful, or just like, it's just like, how would it really do? Like I like it, so obviously I'm going to, like, own a copy of what I'm going to release. And I have like friends that like anything that I release, so it's just like I already know that people will have it. But I guess it's just like I really dig deep and like try to plan, okay, who else would potentially like this. But starting out, we just would always do like a run of 50, and
Okay.
so we would split it evenly. The band would get 25 and I would get 25, and it's just sort of like, I like keeping it as sort of like first come first serve sort of thing. If you really like it and you see that it's like we have 25 on our Bandcamp and the artist will have 25 on their Bandcamp, like if you really like it, you'll get it. And then from then I started to gauge, like people would be like, hey, do you have any more of like this, like tapes for this release? And I'll just be like, sorry, we only made like 50. And then after that I just started noticing, okay, like let's like up it and make like 70.
Right.
Or 80, and it just kind of just kept going, and sort of like really pushing it, sort of like the scarcity of it. It's just like, hey, like there's this release that came out and everyone is downloading it on Bandcamp and streaming it. Don't forget, like there's only like 40 like tapes in existence of this. It's just like, if you really liked it, you can get it, but it's like, there'll only be 40 people that will get it. And I guess now we sort of move to like, we make like a run of 100, so it's like 50-50. And I guess the most where we've made is this band Crumb that we've released. We made 250 tapes for their tour, and I like tour managed them like for like a whole month, and we sold 250 tapes.
Wow.
So that was
good for you.
An eye-opening, sort of being like, okay, like this band has such a pull and like such an established fan base already that it makes sense when like the more the like band, the more listeners the band will get. That's when we're like, okay, we need to up like the quantity.
Right. Do you, just side note, do you put the records up anywhere else, or is it just Bandcamp? Like, are they available on Apple Music or Spotify?
So some of them are available on Spotify and Apple Music. I'm not against streaming whatsoever.
Okay.
It's just always been, I guess if I'm gonna be talking as like a music fan, I just never had the sort of like financial extra like leverage to be like, I'm gonna pay for a subscription to like use Spotify, even though I like my partner and friends have Spotify, and like, I'll like hop on their phone to like, play something and stuff like that. But a lot of it's just mostly is to the artist, that if it's like, hey, like we don't do this, not just because it's like I don't want to do it. It's just like mostly focused on getting the physical medium out, and they sort of like do it on their own as well. And like I kind of like show them the ropes and like everything. Like this is where like if you get any money back, it comes back to you and stuff. I've just always have stayed away from that because things kind of get weird. Yeah. And I know people have had experiences where like the label will put out the music on streaming services themselves, and sort of like, let's say there's like a song that gets on like a curated like official Spotify playlist, and like, it makes like a few bones here and there that I know I've had friends that have had bad experiences with other labels like that. So I just kind of mostly just be like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna focus on the physical medium. If you
That's
wanna
cool.
put it on Spotify and Apple Music or anything, I can send you the links. We can sit down and we can set everything up for you. You know what I mean? And like put on like where the money is gonna go to and stuff. So it's like,
Totally. And I mean, that's a good point I never thought of, because if you're focusing on like short runs of tapes, like Spotify and streaming is permanent essentially. So it's like
yeah,
at some point, depending on the agreement, but for indie labels, at some point that album will have to be transferred back to the artist, or at some point it'll have to be removed. And I see, and that has happened with me, where it can get a little hairy, because you still want the music to be up there for the fans. But yeah, you end up having to transfer it over or something.
So I just sort of have that option for the band, being like, hey, if you wanna, like, we don't do this, but you're more than welcome to put it up, and we can like help you sort of like sort of help facilitate all that. But like you will be the one in control of that and having to like pay for like the if you're using DistroKid or whatever sort of like service like that, it's like you like kind of worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. I try to talk about press and pitching to press with labels, because it's something that's really daunting to me and very time consuming. And it's always like very vaguely beneficial. I think it's helpful, but then I'm not sure it's worth all of the effort I put into it. What's working with press and pitching records for you? What advice do you have for our listeners?
I was super that was something in like the early years of the label. I was super like also dedicating a lot of time and effort into, and let's face it, it gets super easy to get frustrated. Sending out 100 emails and sort of making all of them super personable, so it's not just like a copy and paste sort of thing. And it's really discouraging just getting like 2 people or 3 people like to get back. And it's like I was on the other end too, and it's like it's super daunting to be like a sort of publication and having like your inbox filled with like 30,000 emails. And it's just like I know like I know a lot of it is based on like chance and luck, and I have nothing against blogs or anything, but I guess what I've done now is just mostly trying to like I know people read blogs and publications, like mid-sized to bigger ones to the smaller ones. So I mostly any sort of efforts and time that I'm going to put into pitching, I just mostly go to sort of like smaller mid-sized blogs where it's just like I know the person running the blog. I know like they're like another email that I can reach out to them to, and so I just mostly focus my time and efforts on the people that are on the same level as I am, and like the like internet and sort of music community that I'm in, because why I can release a record that I truly believe, and I'm like, this is good enough that it can be on Pitchfork and on the Fader, on this sort of big publication. But I'm also super real with myself and know that it's so easy to get into these like sort of realms and publications if you have like a PR agent, or like working with like a firm that has already had a track record with like I think it's just the most important thing, I guess, advice is just building relationships with the people that you're already with in your community, because that person who is running a little like college blog, they have aspirations to make that like their like life to be like so don't like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone that I'm like talking to in like a small blog, if they want to keep going at it, they might be a future writer of Pitchfork.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I've just mostly have like really been set on like, what, I'm going to forge and really establish the relationships I have with already these people. It's been going well, and we trust each other, and they like trust what I'm doing, and I trust what they're doing, that I'm just going to continue building this relationship. And if Citrus City gets to a point where it's a bigger than, I don't know what will happen like a few down the lines. I know it's just like I'm going to have these people that have been working since day one in mind. So it's just like, I guess it's just really forging and establishing the relationships that you already have
Mm.
and not taking them for granted. If, let's say, you get a few hundred more followers on like social media accounts, and or like, I don't know, it's just, but also not selling yourself short. I guess it's like always great to take risks, but I'm very grateful for the people that I'm around and the people have been supporting me since day one. And I think I'm just really about forging and continuing the relationships that I've had with like smaller to mid-side publications. So it's like, if the fader writes about something, that's totally great and all, but I'm not going to sort of like waste my time pitching to folks that I know I'm still not I'm a bit away from, you know.
Well, you actually brought up a great point, and I've actually had this come true, like you were saying, is it's so easy to dismiss a blog that has like 30 followers, or to dismiss like a Twitter account or a Spotify playlist that has like, under 100 followers, because we're kind of thinking so big picture when we're trying to pitch these records. And we're looking at like trying to land, people with big followings. And so we're like, well, what does it really matter if a blog writes about me, but only 2 or 3 people read the blog? And it's so easy to think that way, but your advice to not think that way and to not take those people for granted is huge. And I've experienced, small little blogs grow into really big blogs. And I have been regretfully dismissive to people in the past because of the size of their blog. And then I look back 5 years later and it's like, wow, they're still doing it. And they're quite large, you know what I mean? Now I wish I had been not such a jerk, And so I think that's a really good point, is to just, anybody who wants to take the time to write about your record, you should move heaven and earth for them.
No, yeah, exactly. Because it's like we're all doing the same thing at the end of the day, which is sharing music. It's different sort of ways, but it's just it. We all have sort of like the same goal and reasons, and it's just for example, the Twitter account, very small album reviews, like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love those guys.
Like they have been covering stuff like our stuff when they had like 10 followers on Twitter, and they have like grown so much over like the years that it's just, the
Yeah.
tip someone who is just like, okay, this is great that they're like, tweeting and like, promoting like our releases, but I can see how someone could be dismissive and be like, they only have 10 followers. Like, why am I really going to like, like pay that much attention to them? And I would just always send them sneak peeks and previews. I'm like, yo, we have this coming out in like a few months. Like, check it out. Here's like a download code that hasn't come out yet. Or like, I don't know. I'm just really about also giving download codes just randomly about for something that hasn't come out yet. And just, it's always like a surprise for like even fans. I like, or like other sort of like blog writers. It's just like, here's a download code, like here's this and that. I just try to keep everyone in the loop.
That's smart.
Whether they have like 15 followers, whether they're just like an avid like fan that has purchased a tape here and there. It's
That's
just
amazing.
like, I just like to have a lot of people in mind, because it's like, I know a lot of other people. I think it's just a lot of bigger labels really like to keep this sort of like elitist sort of gatekeeping thing, and I've always used to run into that as like a music fan, journalist, and even now as like a label runner, that it's just like, it's not this weird sort of like clique, and I've just want to have everyone involved. Whether you're not running a label, it's just like, it's all music and everyone deserves to like listen.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, I love it. And I love that you bless like your fans like that, and sending out some private links. I'm going to do that actually when we get off the phone. That's a great idea. And I think that it's all about, and this is what we talk about, these small blogs and these small, curators, is that the hope is that they become a fan of your label in the same way that you're a fan of the artists who are on your label. And it's all about fandom. It's all about, we're just a fan of good music, and you can't get a Pitchfork writer, or you can't get a certain writer or a publicist or anybody to do anything for you if they're not a fan of the music. And so I think, like, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud here, Manny, but just like developing a label out of fandom and developing your strategy out of how can I do this out of a way of me being a fan of the band and finding more people who are fans of this music, including writers.
No, yeah, and it's just, it's just things where I've seen doing it. It's just making things super personable at the end of the day, and I know it's just a lot of people sort of forget that it's just like I'm only 24 years old
Hmm.
personally. I'm just a 24-year-old like person. I started this when I was like 20, 21 years old. I college kid, just like some of y'all. Like I am like in college like loan debt, just like you, and it's just like, hey, like I'm just putting out some music that hopefully you enjoy, and it's just like, I guess not detaching yourself from like, oh, because I run a label, I like, am sort of like better than you. I don't know if that it
Yeah.
really is like making sense as to what we've been talking about, but
What
it's like,
What's the hardest part of running the label for you?
um, I think the hardest thing is sometimes dealing with folks that don't really know how things what goes into it, and sort of it's not, I would love that the label became like my livelihood, and I could sort of like, really make some money off it, where it's just like not me per se, where it's just like a lot of like money is like coming in to be like, whoa, I can like just dedicate my time to this. I think it's just mostly people forgetting that it's just like there's a person running this, and it's just me nowadays. Like sending out emails, packaging tapes.
Hmm.
Um, I book a lot of shows in Richmond. I like book tours. I do a lot of the in-house, like, like PR. Just everything is just me. So I think sometimes it's really hard when something happens in my personal life, or something happens in like my like work life, that I'm just like, I have to work like three doubles back to back now. I'm sorry I didn't send out this tape. I will get it right away, but like I also need to like look out for myself and like my life.
Hmm.
And I think it's like sometimes getting that point across, and that's why I think people gravitate a lot to Citrus City, and that's why I'm very vocal on like Twitter and like other social media, because it's just, I always want people to remember that there's like a person like you like doing this, and it's not that I'm like looking to like get a thank you all the time, or like to make money off like the label or artist, but it's just like I also need to like look out for myself and like my well-being. So I guess it's always coming across people where it's just like, where's my tape? And it's just like, yo, your tape is gonna come, but you ordered it yesterday, and I'm like working a double right now. Like, I am so sorry. Or like not responding to like an email fast enough, and it's just like, I'm sorry I didn't get back to like your demo inquiry, but like I'm like driving right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm across the country. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think I appreciate how transparent you are. And I've talked about this with, Matt at Forged and Jesse at Father Daughter. These are people, and yourself, who are very transparent on Twitter. And I think it's helpful. I don't see it as somebody being negative or complaining. I see it as just, first of all, as a someone who also runs a label, I see it as like, it's comforting. It's like, oh great, I'm not the only one who has to work another job and has to do other things to be able to make time to respond to an email. And but I also just, I think it informs a lot of people that this isn't something that's super easy, and that there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and I think I'm always trying to break down these like esoteric and like super old school thoughts on like what a label is, because there's like people that think, oh, Citrus City is this super well established like label, and if I get like, we don't even like quote unquote sign anyone. It's just sort of on the basis like, hey, we're gonna put out your tapes and we'll like help you out. It's more of like a support group,
Yeah.
pretty much. I'm just like helping out and sort of like, but yes, there's sometimes people think like, oh, because like I'm on Citrus City, or I want to get on Citrus City because I want to like become famous and big and like get like an advance. And I'm just like, I have run into so many people like that where it's just like, buddy, I'm so sorry, but I we don't do that. And
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
I think the whole landscape of labels, like people have this weird perception that we're still in the 90s and these labels are like funding these crazy like music videos and these crazy
Oh
just
my gosh.
like rollouts. It does not work like that anymore. Like you see a lot of major like mainstream artists like not even signing to labels anymore because it's not honestly like, you know, if you're a major artist or you're really wanting to break it, you can pretty much do everything yourself. Like, you know, Chance the Rapper has a distribution deal with like Apple, like, you know, and
Right.
it's just like y- all like it's all going towards him. You don't need like the middleman, like a label at the end of the day to sort of like help facilitate that things. If you're in a position to be like, if you have a team, like you got a manager, you got a lawyer, you got certain people to help you out, but it really is like, you know, if you really want to like I just think the way people think major labels or labels work, it's not like that anymore.
Totally. Yep. No, that's totally true. I've had an email like that too recently. Actually, somebody was asking, pitching their record, and they had a lot of their ducks in a row. But then it was like they had asked like what the advance would be if they were to sign with us, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's like so far from like an advance. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's just like
That's insane.
I have like $15 in
Maybe,
like
yeah,
my
that's
PayPal
generous.
account I can send you if you really want. Like, you know, I don't know. It's just really funny, and it's just like I'm always trying to tell folks like, you know, it's not it doesn't things don't work the way they used to when it was going on like that, you know?
Well, even the contract thing. I mean, we don't talk about contracts too much on the podcast because it's, you know, up to the labels to talk about it. But you know, for me personally, it was something I decided about 3 or 4 years ago where I thought it would be best not to have contracts because the contracts mostly just benefit the label. It's like saving you if the artist blows up or something, and you can benefit from them in the future. To me, I think I would be okay if an artist like got cold feet and wanted to walk away right, you know, at the last minute or halfway through the release or something, or months after the release. Like to me, I just feel less stress and anxiety if everybody is free, if everybody is like just doing this because we're all friends and we all think that this is the best decision for the record. And so for me, I'm with you. I've kind of stopped doing contracts. They've just been basically like email, you know, face-to-face contracts, like just saying, this is what I plan to do, and make sure it's in line with their expectations, and then that's it.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's always something that we have never done contracts to this day, and it's just always it's funny because there was when I transferred over to VCU in Richmond, my advisors were always like, you need to do internships, you need to do this and this. And I was gonna do this internship with this like local label in town that they're like, I guess pretty semi-established. I don't know. But you know, they were just asking me about how we ran our operation, and I was telling them like, well, we don't really do contracts. We just kind of do everything out of the basis of like, we want to help you out, and you don't have a tape out, so we would gladly like put it out free of charge. Like, no, like you have to give us money back or this, or hit them with like an invoice. Um, and he was just kind of like, oh, well, you do handshake deals, like that's not how we do it here. And it was just like he kept like pretty much like making me feel bad the way we did stuff, and I'm
Right.
just like, hey, like I'm not looking to make money off this. I just really like music, and it's just like I just didn't end up doing the internship, and I just kind of motivated me to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do what I want to do because this is the way I really want to do it, and I feel really passionate and strongly about this. And if people make people make fun of me or not, then I'm not going to like. That's fine. Like I'm not
Mm.
gonna like change it just because it's not the norm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's like the best way. And we've had artists that are about to sign with bigger labels, and it's like I've always had like a friendly relationship with everyone that we've put out, some more than others, and I always try to like keep up with everyone that we've talked to, be like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's the family? How's how's your
Hmm.
significant other? How's just like life?" And I've always just made it very clear that if, you know, there's like a bigger label or a bigger opportunity, please take it. Don't
Nice.
feel like you're so like just binded by like Citrus City. Don't feel like we would feel like some type of way about it.
Mm. Good
The
for
only
you, man.
things that the only things I don't like is when I've had negative experiences with bigger labels that they sort of try to come in when there's already a working relationship established, when like we're like mid release and they're just sort of kind of like, hey, ditch them and we'll like give you this and this and
Mm.
stuff. And but it's just like we have the tapes literally coming out like in 2 days.
Oh man.
What are you trying to do? So I think it's like I guess it's like also I guess lining up to like the question like what is the hardest thing is really not being like a small tape label, not getting the sort of like respect from bigger established labels because there's just sort of like, oh, they're just a tape label. It's like it's whatever. We don't have to like worry about them. But I guess what my big plan and goal is to really implement the ideas that I've had of being a like smaller like tape label and maybe hopefully like getting certain distribution deals and stuff like that to
Yeah.
really sort of like I don't know, rival what these people and models that they're doing because I think it's like really disrespectful that there's like this weird still tier of like, oh, you're just a tape label, like we're not to take you serious, but it's just like I know that you guys are like looking through like our Bandcamp and trying to sign like our artists and like kind of make things like weird, and it's just like I don't really like that.
Yeah.
And I guess like I've been sort of like I really don't want to do contracts, but I don't like how a lot of our back catalog has been like planning to be reissued by bigger labels in like like next year pretty much, and it's
Mm.
like I'm super stoked for like the artists, that they're gonna get signed, but it's one of those things that once it gets rolled out, it's just like never before ever released, like debut EP. But it's just like we just did the tape for this. Like
Right.
what? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, and we get no mention of it or
Oh
anything, and it's
yeah.
just
Oh, for
like,
sure.
and I don't know, stuff like that is what makes me like really kind of discouraged because it's like I'm not looking to get credit or anything, but like I put in a lot of time and an effort
Oh, for
and
sure. Yeah. Definitely.
into this and to just sort of it get brushed under the rug like it never happened. I don't know. I think it's really disrespectful and I just wish like bigger established labels really understood that it's like, hey, you were in this position too before. Like you were like starting out. So
Yeah.
I just don't really understand why, you know, the culture in itself doesn't support itself and sustain itself.
Hmm.
But then that's why, I'm glad that, you know, on Twitter, I like have like we have cultivated like a small like tape community at itself. Like
Hmm.
I'm really like good friends with like Matt at Forge Artifacts. Like
Right.
we did like a release together. Um, we are really good friends with like Disposable America.
Hmm.
Um, Sports Day Records, Dead Plant. Like it's just
Yeah.
so many other tape like records and like labels that it's just like, you know what? I'm going to foster this community and be a part of this community because at the end of the day, if the big man doesn't want to acknowledge us, that's totally fine. I have these other like-minded individuals that I'm going to support and are going to support me, because it's like at the end of the day, we're just doing the same thing.
Well, it's sad that that's happening because it's forcing you. I mean, it's forcing you into doing contracts, into doing something uncomfortable you don't want to do because, because of that, because of that somebody has like, because of somebody's nefarious behavior. Now you have to do something that's not how you like to do your business. That's tough.
Yeah, because it's like, it's just super weird to see a release that I've like put so much time and effort, have taken off work, and
Yeah.
to really like help facilitate being like, okay, I need to like ship out all these orders, like, okay, I can't, like, I need to do it today because I need to do it today, because I've just kind of maybe have taken a few like extra days or like a week like longer than like expected. And then to see a more established label now like making money off that, it just makes me feel really uncomfortable. And it's always like qualms that I have within myself, that it's just like, do I have to do this and this, because then I'm like obviously like going backwards in my own personal life and really not, you know what I mean?
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. It's just super weird and uncomfortable. And it's like I've talked about it with like a lot of like our artists and being like, hey, would you feel uncomfortable if we kind of start being like any sort of back catalog stuff that to be reissued, we have like, you know what I mean, have
Yeah.
some sort of like get like a 10% of it or like whatever. And
Yeah.
like for the most part, everyone has been very like receptive and like into it, because it's like, I don't know, this whole thing with Citrus City, it's been like a for friends, like, by friends. So it's like we're
Yeah.
all friends really trying to help each other out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like 10% is great, but it's like at a worst case scenario, or at the very least, it would be nice that like in the press release for a band's new record on a major label, it just said, these guys after their debut EP, and then in brackets, Citrus City Records, comma 2017. You know what I mean? It's like just like reference. It's almost like
Yeah.
just reference that it was on, this is the label it was on. Because I think for diehard music fans, I would be really interested in like small labels that's where bigger artists have got their start, and to go and check out that farm team and see like what kind of records they're developing, knowing that some of these artists might be on major labels in a couple of years.
Yeah, and it's like, you're totally right. Like I would just honestly be okay with just like a mention, just a
Yeah.
shout out or something. Just a little like not even going in depth, just like Citrus City Records, it came out this year and that's it. Like, maybe like I hyperlink to like a Bandcamp, but that's really it's like something that little goes such a long way.
Mm.
And it's just giving like credit where it's properly due the majority of the time. But then it's like, you know, I don't know. It's just super weird. And like,
No, it's you have a right to feel that way. I think, taking a step further, I would love to see, Apple Music and Spotify, where, set up almost similar to how Bandcamp is, where if I go to one of your band's profile pages on Spotify, it'll say like in the bottom left corner in a small white font, it'll say like copyright 2018 Citrus City or whatever, or the band or whoever the copyright holder is. And it would be nice if that was like a little bit bigger and if it was a button and they could like fans could click on that and then be taken to like any other release that falls under that label banner. You know what I mean? Just so that labels get a little bit more of a shout out on those bigger platforms, I think could be really cool.
no, yeah, that would totally be awesome. And I know they're like slowly like I think that it's like in due time, because I know they're like now giving like credit to like producers and
Totally.
like
Yeah. Oh,
and it
man.
would just be cool to go even a more step, being like, oh, like this person played guitar on this track, if like so and so, or like this
Yes.
person, like But I think it's like in due time, because I know you're not the only person that I've talked to who has mentioned that, and it's just been like other people that have been like, hey, like I have friends that are like just studio musicians or just like like
Yeah.
touring musicians, and it's just like I think it's just in general the way the music landscape has always been about just focusing on sort of like this is the bigger label putting it out. This is like the major artist, but it's just so many like people and just so many things going in and out of like everything that I just think once everyone is on the full like wavelength where it's just like we need to give credit because it's like the right thing to do, I think
Right.
that will like make things a lot easier.
And and we have full confidence that major corporations will do the right thing. Yeah, I know, man. I think I hope it is in due time, and I think it's cool about the credits for the engineers and stuff. I was listening to this new Gia Margaret record, and I was thinking, man, whoever engineered this record, I would love to hear whatever else they've done, because they record things in a cool manner. And I think that the platforms need to cater a little bit more towards super fans and people who read the liner notes and people who are obsessed with producers and session drummers and being like, let me hear some other records this session drummers played on.
Yeah, that's why I love like I feel like a site that a lot of the times gets very overlooked is Disc Dogs, because I love how it's like
True.
you can really sort of go deep in and being like, okay, like who engineered it, who like mixed and mastered it, and they have their own little like hyperlink profile of like, this is like, so for example, a record we put out by this band called Keep from Richmond, they got their stuff, engineered and sort of like recorded by this someone called Jeff Ziegler, who has worked with like a lot of like sort of like shoegaze and sort of like post rock sort of bands,
Yeah.
and it's just like he is credited on it on Disc Dogs, whoever put it up, and he has his sort of his own page of like a lot of things that he's like worked on. So I think like that is like super cool, and then you see, this drummer played on this track, this other person played bass on these two songs, but then there's like someone else that played bass on this one song. So it's just like, I don't know, I think that's all really cool, and I've always been really interested in stuff like that as well.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, listen, this has been great to talk to you, and I'm glad to hear you've been listening to the podcast as well. That's kind of cool. I appreciate that.
No, yeah, I've been plugging it away with anyone that is into like podcasts in general.
Oh, thank you.
And into sort of anything where it's just like, I think a lot of them that I've been listening to, it's just always nice and refreshing hearing like voices of like my favorite labels, or like friends that I've just like Matt. I've only talked to Matt on like through text and like email and Twitter. So to like hear Matt's voice, I was like, oh, that's how Matt sounds like? Whoa,
yeah, I know.
This is like what, like, I guess Matt's like background and experiences, like this is sick.
Yeah, no, I get that too. It's so cool to learn so much from these people. And like for me, the biggest thing is to just share in the experiences, in the good experiences and the bad experiences, just to be like, okay, there's somebody in Virginia, there's somebody in Texas, there's somebody in the UK who is also experiencing the letdowns of sending 1,000 emails and hearing back from one person.
No, totally. And it's just like, it's all been nice, and I think it's really cool to see the new sort of just so many like-minded people, and it's just really trying to break this down, sort of this quote unquote gatekeeping, like sort of like elitist sort of like mindset, where it's just like, why withhold information, why withhold like, stories or anything. It's just like we're all just out here doing the same thing, and just like, I guess if anyone is listening to this episode, like whenever it comes up, it's just hit me up. Like, I'm always down to chat, always down to like sort of help out anyone that have any questions, any frustrations or like concerns. Like I'm just always down to help whoever.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Scott. Much love.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please check out our sponsor, Work Hard, Playlist Hard, by going to ebook.othersongsmusic.com and checking that out and using the coupon code OTHER. You can subscribe to us via our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/othersongs, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Manny from Citrus City Records. You can check them out at citruscityrecords.bandcamp.com. They're also on Twitter. Manny's a great guy to stay in touch with. Thanks for listening.